Hi, today's topic is factoring a polynomial using a greatest common factor. To be successful, you need the following skills. You need to be able to find a greatest common factor, you need to be able to divide monomials, and you need to be able to distribute. If you have trouble with any of these topics, you may want to stop here, go back and review. To help you out, I have made some videos on these things. First of all, you always want to check to make sure all like terms have been combined. Most of the time, they have been before you've started. For the purposes of this video, you do not have to worry about that step. First thing we're going to do is we're going to find the greatest common factor. Second, we're going to divide the greatest common factor from each term. Assuming we've done everything right when you do the division, there should be no fractions. Third, we're going to finish off by checking the answers by distributing. In writing the answer out, we're going to write the greatest common factor in front of a set of parentheses, and then we're going to put each of the quotients inside the parentheses. So the first step was to find the greatest common factor. So when we look at our two terms, with the 6 and the 3, we're going to get 3 as part of our greatest common factor. The x squared and the x cubed means x squared will be part of our greatest common factor. And with the y to the 4th and y squared will be part of our greatest common factor. Then we're going to divide. My recommendation is to take a second and actually physically write out the division. Seems to help most of my students as far as making sure they don't mess anything up. Now we need to find the quotients to put on the inside of the parentheses. So when we do the first division here, 6 divided by 3 will be 2. X squared over x squared will simplify to give us 1. And y to the 4th over y squared will simplify to give us y squared. Keep the sign the same, and then do the second term. 3 divided by 3 will be 1. X cubed over x squared will be an x. And y squared over y squared will simplify to give us 1. So we're just left with an x in the parentheses. Now we want to check. The 3 times the 2 will give us 6. We'll have an x squared. And y squared times y squared will be y to the 4th. That checks with the original. When we distribute for the second part, we're going to get 3. We should get an x cubed and a y squared. That also checks with the original. So the 3x squared y squared times the quantity 2y squared plus x is our answer. We factored correctly. For our next example, if we look at the coefficients, we got 10 and 15, so 5 will be part of our greatest common factor. We got an x cubed and an x, so we'll have an x as part of our greatest common factor. And with the y squared and the y cubed, we should have a y squared as part of our greatest common factor. So we're going to be doing the division. So the quotients are going to go inside the parentheses. For the first set, 10 divided by 5 will be 2. X cubed over x will be an x squared, and y squared over y squared should simplify to give us 1. Keep the sign the same. Switch to the second term. 15 divided by 5 will be 3. X over x will simplify to give us 1. And y cubed over y will be y squared. So we do our check. 5 times 2 will be 10. X times x squared will be x cubed. And then we'll have the y squared. That checks. We'll have our minus sign. 5 times 3 is 15. We'll have an x. And then y squared times y squared is y to the 4th. And wait a minute. That doesn't check out, right? Has anybody caught what went wrong? Yeah, I forgot my square with the y there. So if we're going to fix this, y cubed divided by y squared is now just y. So that when we distribute, y squared times y would give us y cubed. That now matches the original. So this will now be our answer. So it is to your advantage to make sure you double check your answers. Okay, moving up on the difficulty level, now we're going to divide out the greatest common factor from a trinomial. Starting with the greatest common factor with the 2, 8, and 12, we're going to have a 2. Well, the first term and the second terms have an x in them. The third term does not, so x will not be part of our greatest common factor. And if we look at the y's, we got a y cubed, a y, and a y to the fourth, so y will be part of our greatest common factor. So we do our first division. 2 divided by 2 will be 1. We'll have an x, and y cubed over y will give us a y squared. Keep the sign the same. Move on to the next term. 8 divided by 2 will be 4. We'll have an x squared, and y over y will simplify to give us 1. Keep the sign the same. Move on to the next term. 12 divided by 2 will be 6. Y to the fourth divided by y will be y to the third. Now we want to check our answers. So we should be getting a 2, an x, and a y cubed. Check. We should have an 8, an x squared, and a y. That checks. And then we should have a 12 and a y to the fourth. That also checks with the original. So we factored it correctly. For our next example, once again, a trinomial. If we look at the 9, 12, and 3, well, 3 is part of our greatest common factor. We have an x cubed, x, and x. Well, x is part of our greatest common factor. And with the y squared, y cubed, and y, we'll have y as part of our greatest common factor. So we're going to be putting our quotients in the parentheses, starting with our first term. 9 divided by 3 will be 3. X cubed over x simplifies to x squared. Y squared over y will give us a y. Keep the sign the same. Move on to our next term. 12 divided by 3 will be 4. X over x simplifies to 1. And y cubed over y will give us a y squared. Keep our next sign and move on. Note 3 divided by 3 is 1, x divided by x is 1, and y divided by y is 1. So everything divides to give us 1. The reason I always recommend writing out the division steps is this way. If you get 1 for an answer or a quotient, you will actually see it. Too many students leave that term out. If we do our check, let's see, we're getting 9x cubed y squared. That matches. Minus 12xy cubed. That matches. And our 3xy, that matches as well. So we have our answer. Moving on to our last example. Now we're going to a polynomial with 4 terms. So now we have to find the greatest common factor in all 4 terms. So if we look at this one, since the first term has a leading coefficient of 1, there's no number that we can take out as part of our greatest common factor. However, if we look at the x's, we got an x to the fifth, x to the fourth, x to the third, and x squared. So x squared will be part of our greatest common factor. With the y squared, y cubed, y, and y cubed, y is the other part of our greatest common factor. So we're going to divide out x squared and y from each term. So as we do our first division, we're going to get x cubed and y. We're going to keep the sign the same. Do our next division, we're going to have 5x squared and y squared. Going to keep that sign the same. Now we're going to get 25x. The y over y will be 1. Keep that sign the same. And with the last term, we're going to get 10. X squared over x squared will be 1. Y cubed over y will be a y squared. And then basically last thing we got to do is check it out, make sure we're good. So let's see, we got x to the 5th y squared. That matches. Well, 5x to the 4th y cubed. That matches the original. We got 25 x to the 3rd y. That also matches. And the last part of our distributing, we got minus 10 x squared and y to the 3rd. That also matches the original. So we got our answer. So I hope this has been helpful as far as learning how to factor out a greatest common factor from a polynomial. Good luck.